I was 67 years old when I finally understood why my father spent 40 years looking at me like I was the only one who got the joke. At his funeral, my brothers walked away with 3,000 acres of Montana ranch land, 200 head of cattle, and every piece of equipment our family had built up over 70 years. I got a dented military footlocker that smelled like motor oil and disappointment. They laughed. My sister-in-law actually laughed. Then I opened that footlocker, and 5 words from a lawyer I'd never met changed everything I thought I knew about my father, my family, and why I'd spent 35 years running into burning buildings instead of running a ranch. My name is William Morrison. Everyone calls me Bill, or they used to call me Chief back when I was running the fire station in Billings. But that day, standing in the ranch house I grew up in, watching my brothers Marcus and Joel divide up what they thought was our father's empire, I was just the disappointment, the one who left, the one who chose smoke and sirens over soil and sunrise. Let me back up. My father, James Morrison, was a third-generation Montana rancher. He came back from World War II in 1945, married my mother Sarah within 6 months, and started building the Morrison Ranch into something that meant something. By the time I was born in 1958, our spread covered 2,000 acres of the best grazing land in Park County. My brothers came before me, Marcus in 54, Joel in 56. I was supposed to be the last piece of the puzzle. 3 sons to carry on the legacy, 3 boys to split the land 3 ways someday. Except I ruined that plan when I was 19 years old. It was July 1977. I'd just finished my first year at Montana State, supposedly studying ranch management like my father wanted. But that summer, a wildfire tore through the mountains west of our property. I watched the smoke columns for 3 days before I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove out there. I don't know what I was thinking, but when I saw those firefighters, saw what they were doing, saw how they moved like a unit, trusted each other with their lives, something clicked. Something my father never understood. I dropped out of college that fall, enrolled in fire science training in Billings. My father didn't speak to me for 2 years. When he finally did, it was to tell me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. That ranching was in my blood. That Morrison men worked the land their great-grandfathers had claimed. That I was spitting on everything that mattered. Marcus, the oldest, he understood the path. Married young, had 3 kids, learned every inch of the ranch. Joel, he was the numbers guy. He managed the business side, the sales, the contracts. They were the team. They were the legacy. And me? I was the one who showed up for Christmas dinners in my fire department jacket, smelling like smoke, with calluses in all the wrong places. But here's the thing nobody knew. My father wrote me a letter every single month for 35 years. Never missed one. Just short notes. Heard about that warehouse fire. Glad you made it out. Or, your mother showed me the newspaper article about the family you saved. She's proud. She won't say it, but she is. Never signed them Love, Dad. Always just J. Morrison, like he couldn't quite bring himself to close the distance. But he wrote them. Every month, 35 years times 12 months. That's 420 letters. I kept every single one in a box in my closet. My wife Linda used to ask me why. I never had a good answer. After she passed in 2010, those letters became something else. Proof that maybe I wasn't as forgotten as I felt. My father died on June 15th, 2015. Heart attack. Quick. He was 89 years old and still checking fence lines every morning. Marcus found him slumped against a post, his horse standing guard. The way my father would have wanted to go, everyone said. Out on the land that defined him. The funeral was on a Saturday. Huge turnout. My father had been a pillar of the community. War hero, successful rancher, deacon at the church. I flew in from Arizona, where I'd retired 2 years earlier. Small condo, mostly just me and memories. My son Thomas met me at the airport. He'd driven up from Denver, good kid, 42 years old now, lawyer, doing well. But even he felt the tension when we pulled up to the ranch house. Marcus and Joel were already holding court. Joel's wife Patricia was directing the caterers. Marcus's kids, all grown now, were standing around looking appropriately somber while clearly calculating their inheritance. You know that look. The one that says they're mourning but also already spending the money in their heads. My nephew Derek actually said to me, "Uncle Bill, glad you could make it back to civilization." Like 35 years of saving lives was some kind of extended vacation from reality. The service was beautiful. My father deserved that. The burial was at the family plot on the North Hill, overlooking the whole spread. Summer sun beating down. Montana sky so big it hurt to look at. My mother had been buried there in 1998. Now they were together again. I stood there thinking about all those letters, all those years of him watching my life from a distance, never quite able to bridge the gap his pride had created. After the burial, everyone came back to the ranch house. That's when Gerald Whitmore, our family lawyer, asked us to gather in my father's study, Marcus, Joel, and me, the three Morrison boys. One last time. Gerald had been handling our family's legal matters since before I was born. He was 73 now, silver hair, steady hands, the kind of lawyer who still used a fountain pen. He sat behind my father's desk, opened a leather portfolio, and cleared his throat. "Your father was very specific about his wishes," Gerald said. "I'm going to read the will exactly as he wrote it." Marcus leaned forward. Joel had a notepad out, ready to take notes. I sat back in my chair, already knowing how this was going to go. The ranch would be split between Marcus and Joel. I'd probably get some money, maybe a token piece of equipment. A nice thanks for showing up package. Gerald began reading. Technical language about assets and properties. Then he got to the specifics. "To my son Marcus Morrison, I leave the ranch house, the main barn, and 1,500 acres of the eastern grazing land, including all structures and improvements thereon." Marcus nodded, satisfied. That was the prime land, the heart of the operation. "To my son Joel Morrison, I leave the western fields, 1,500 acres including the cattle operation, all livestock, all ranching equipment, and the equipment barn." Joel made a note. He was already calculating, I could tell. Between the two of them, they'd have the whole operation. They could keep running it exactly as our father had. Then Gerald looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. "To my son William Morrison, I leave the contents of my military footlocker from my service in World War II, currently stored in the attic. He'll understand why." Silence, complete silence. Then Joel started laughing, not a small chuckle, a full rolling laugh that he tried to hide behind his hand. "A footlocker?" Marcus said slowly. "Dad left him a footlocker?" "That's what the will states," Gerald said. His face was carefully neutral. Patricia, Joel's wife, wasn't even trying to hide her smile. "Well, I suppose everyone gets what they deserve." That one hit different. Everyone gets what they deserve. Like 35 years of public service, of saving lives, of building something different than what my father built. All of that deserved a box of old war memorabilia. Marcus at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Bill, I'm sure there's some. I mean, maybe there's something valuable in there?" "It's fine," I said. My voice came out flat. "I'll get it before I leave." Gerald closed the portfolio. "There is one more thing. William, your father left a sealed letter for you. He instructed me to give it to you privately, after you've retrieved the footlocker." Joel snorted. A letter and a footlocker. Lucky guy. I left the study, walked straight through the gathering, out the back door, and stood on the porch where I used to sit with my father on summer evenings before everything went wrong. Thomas found me there 20 minutes later. "Dad," he said quietly, "you okay?" "Your grandfather and I. We had a complicated relationship. That's one word for it. I chose my path. I knew what it meant. You chose to save lives. That's not something to apologize for." I looked at my son, this good man I'd raised while working double shifts and missing too many school plays. "Go get your car. We're leaving tonight. Don't you want to get the footlocker first?" I did, but I needed a moment. I needed to be alone with whatever my father's final message to me was going to be. So I waited until the house cleared out, until the sun started setting behind the mountains, until I heard Marcus and Joel leave, their voices fading as they discussed their plans for the ranch. Their ranch now. Gerald waited for me in the study. The old lawyer stood when I entered, lifted a metal box from behind the desk, a real footlocker. Army issue, probably from 1945. Dented, scratched, locked with a simple padlock. The keys taped under the bottom, Gerald said. He set it on the desk between us. Then he handed me an envelope. Cream-colored paper, my father's handwriting across the front. William, I've been your family's lawyer for 50 years, Gerald said slowly. I watched you boys grow up. I watched you leave, and I watched your father watch you leave. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound strange, Bill, but I need you to trust me. Open that Footlocker tonight, read that letter, and tomorrow morning, call this number. He handed me a business card. Ask for Robert Chen. Tell him you're James Morrison's son. Who's Robert Chen? Someone who's been waiting for this call for 40 years. That was all he'd say. Gerald Whitmore shook my hand, held it a moment longer than necessary, and left me alone in my father's study with a Footlocker and a letter. I sat there for a long time. The sun was almost down. The house was quiet. I could hear Thomas outside, loading our bags into his car. I picked up the envelope first. My father's handwriting. Neat, precise, same as it had been on 420 letters. I opened it. 5 pages, dated 1 week before he died. William, it began. Not son. Never son in writing. By the time you read this, you'll be standing in my study wondering what the hell the old man was thinking. Your brothers will have the ranch, and you'll have a beat-up Footlocker full of what looks like junk. They'll have laughed. Someone will have made a comment, and you'll be thinking this is exactly what you expected. That this is what you deserve for leaving. You're wrong. I need to tell you something I should have told you 35 years ago, but pride is a hell of a drug, and I was an addict. When you left the ranch to become a firefighter, I told you it was a mistake. I told you Morrison men worked the land. I was angry. I was disappointed. And I was completely, totally wrong. I knew you were right the day after you left. I knew it in my gut. You weren't running away from something. You were running towards something. And that something was real. It was important. It mattered. But I couldn't say it. I'd built my whole identity on this ranch, on this legacy, and admitting you'd found something better. It felt like admitting I'd wasted my life. So instead I wrote you letters. Every month. Never saying what I really meant. Never closing the gap. Just keeping the door open a crack. Hoping maybe someday I'd find the courage to walk through it. I'm writing this because I'm dying. Doctor says my heart's giving out. Could be tomorrow, could be 6 months. But it's coming. And I need you to know the truth before it does. When I came back from the war in 1945, I had $2,000 in saved pay. Everyone was buying ranch land in Montana, so I bought 2,000 acres. Built this place with your grandfather. But I had $500 left over. And one night in a bar in Billings, I met a soldier who'd just come back from Alaska. He told me the government was selling land up there, dirt cheap, because nobody wanted it. Frozen wasteland, he called it. But something about it appealed to me. Maybe because I'd seen enough frozen wasteland in Europe. Maybe because I wanted something that was mine, not Morrison family legacy. So I used that $500 to buy 6,000 acres in Alaska, north of Fairbanks, absolute middle of nowhere, told nobody. Not your mother, not my father, nobody. It was my secret. My backup plan. My just in case. I paid $12 an acre in taxes every year for 70 years. Never visited it. Never saw it. Just paid the taxes and kept it as a sort of insurance policy against my own stupidity. Here's what you need to know, William. 3 months ago, an energy company contacted me. They've been doing surveys in northern Alaska. Oil exploration. And guess where they found something? My 6,000 acres. The acres I bought for $500 in 1945 and ignored for 70 years. They want to lease the drilling rights. The lawyer you need to call, Robert Chen, he's been handling the negotiations. The signing bonus alone is $8 million. The royalties could be another $2 million a year for the next 30 years. Maybe more. Your brothers are getting the ranch. But the ranch is dying, William. Has been for 10 years. The land's mortgaged to the ceiling. The equipment is barely running. The cattle operation loses money every year. I kept it going through loans and credit and sheer stubborn refusal to admit I'd failed. But the numbers don't lie. In 5 years, maybe less, Marcus and Joel are going to wake up and realize they inherited a beautiful prison that's going to bankrupt them. I could have saved it with the Alaska money, but I didn't. You know why? Because I spent 35 years watching you build something real, something that mattered, something that helped people. And I realized that saving the ranch would just be passing on the same trap to another generation. Better to let it end with me. The Footlocker has the original land deed, the tax records, the survey reports, everything you need. Robert Chen has been waiting to finalize the lease agreement. He just needed the heir to sign. I'm leaving you the Alaska land because you were the only one brave enough to walk away from what everyone expected. Because you built your life around helping people instead of helping yourself. Because you understood something I never did until it was too late. Legacy isn't about land or money. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. I was prouder of you every single day, William. Every fire you fought, every life you saved, every time I heard about you on the news. Your mother knew. She'd cut out the articles. We had a whole scrapbook. After she died, I kept adding to it. It's in the Footlocker, too. I never said it out loud. I'm saying it now. You didn't make a mistake when you became a firefighter. You made the right choice. The brave choice. And I'm sorry I couldn't tell you that when it mattered. The ranch was never the real inheritance. It was the test. Your brothers passed it by staying. You passed it by leaving. And now you get to decide what to do with the reward. I'm proud of you, son. I was always proud of you. James Morrison. June 8, 2015. I sat there in my father's study, crying like I was 19 again, reading a letter that said everything I'd needed to hear for 35 years. Thomas found me an hour later. I showed him the letter, showed him the business card Gerald had given me. We found the Footlocker key taped under the bottom, exactly where Gerald said it would be. Inside, the Footlocker was packed carefully. Land deed on top. Property taxes, paid in full through 2015. Survey reports dated 2014. And underneath all of that, a thick scrapbook. My mother's handwriting on the cover. Our bill. I opened it. Newspaper clippings. Every article ever written about me. Every commendation. Every award. Photos someone had taken at different fires. Articles about families I'd saved. Letters to the editor praising the fire department. 35 years of my life, carefully documented by parents who never said they were paying attention. There was also a photo I'd never seen. Me at 19, the day I left for fire training. Standing next to my truck, I looked terrified and determined in equal measure. On the back, my father's handwriting. The day my son became a man. Thomas and I sat up all night going through everything. At 7 in the morning, I called Robert Chen. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. Mr. Morrison, he said, I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you. My father's lawyer said I should call you. Yes, we've been waiting to finalize the lease agreement. The energy company has been very patient, but they need the heir's signature to move forward. Would you be available to meet this week? What exactly are we talking about here? The initial signing bonus is $8 million. Royalties projected at $1.8 to $2.5 million annually for approximately 30 years, depending on extraction rates. Your father was very specific that this was to go to you alone. Not split with your brothers, just you. I looked at Thomas. My son was staring at me with his mouth open. Mr. Morrison, are you still there? I'm here. I'm just processing. Take your time. When you're ready, we have a lot of paperwork to go through. We flew to Anchorage 2 days later, saw the land, 6,000 acres of Alaska wilderness that my father had bought for $500 and held onto for 70 years just because he couldn't stand to admit he might have been wrong about something. Robert Chen was thorough, professional. He walked us through every detail of the lease agreement, the environmental protections, the payment schedules, the legal protections. Everything my father had negotiated before his heart gave out. Your father was a remarkable man, Robert said at one point. Do you know what he told me when I first contacted him about this? He said, I don't need the money. I need to know that my son won't have to worry. He structured the entire agreement around making sure you were protected, Every clause, every term. This wasn't about money for him. It was about finally giving you what you deserved. I signed the papers on June 25th, 2015. 10 days after my father's funeral. $8 million deposited into an account I'd opened specifically for this. More money than I'd earned in my entire career as a firefighter. More money than I ever thought I'd see. I called Marcus that night, told him I needed to come back to Montana, needed to talk to him and Joel together. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. "You sound weird." "Everything's fine. I just need to talk to you both. Tomorrow work?" They agreed. I could hear the curiosity in Marcus's voice. Probably thought I was coming back to complain about the will, to make a scene. Thomas and I drove back to Montana, pulled up to the ranch house the next afternoon. Marcus and Joel were waiting on the porch. Same porch where I'd stood after the will reading, feeling like the disappointment of the century. We sat in the study, same room, same desk, different world. "Look, Bill," Joel started, "if this is about the will—" "It's not," I said. I pulled out the Footlocker documents, set them on the desk. "This is about what was in the Footlocker." I watched their faces as I explained. The Alaska land, the oil rights, the lease agreement, the $8 million signing bonus, the annual royalties. All of it going to me. Just me. Because our father had decided 35 years ago that maybe leaving wasn't the worst thing a son could do. Marcus's face went through several shades of red. Joel looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. $8 million? Joel finally said. "Dad had $8 million and left us a dying ranch? The ranch is dying?" I asked. Marcus slumped in his chair. "Mortgaged to hell. We've been bleeding money for years. Dad kept taking out loans to keep it running. We inherit the land, sure. We also inherit $4 million in debt. The cattle operation lost $300,000 last year alone. We were going to tell you," Joel added quietly. "We just didn't know how. We thought maybe we could turn it around, but the math doesn't work," Marcus finished. "We're going to lose it, Bill. Within 3 years, maybe 2. We're going to lose everything our family built." I let that sit for a minute. Let them feel what I'd felt standing on that porch. What it meant to watch a legacy crumble. To realize you'd been given something that looked valuable but was really just a beautiful trap. Then I said, "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to loan you $2 million. Interest-free. You're going to pay off the mortgages, restructure the operation, maybe lease out some of the grazing land if that makes sense. You're going to save this ranch. But you're going to do it differently than Dad did. You're going to do it smart." Bill Marcus started. "I'm not done. Thomas here is a lawyer. He's going to draw up the paperwork. This is a loan, not a gift. You'll pay it back over 20 years. If the ranch makes money, great. If it doesn't, we'll figure something out. But I'm not going to watch our family's land get sold to developers because Dad was too proud to admit he needed help." Joel was crying. Not loud, just tears running down his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're my brothers. Because Dad wanted me to have this money so I wouldn't have to worry. Well, I won't worry if I know you're okay. And because maybe it's time we stop pretending we have to choose between the land and everything else. Maybe we can have both." Marcus stood up, walked around the desk, pulled me into a hug that would have embarrassed us both 35 years ago. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for laughing, for making you feel like you didn't matter. You mattered, Bill. You always mattered." "I know," I said. "Dad told me." We sat up late that night, the 3 Morrison brothers, talking for the first time in years about things that mattered, about Dad, about Mom, about the weight of expectations and the cost of pride, about what it meant to be a family when everyone wanted different things. "He knew," Marcus said at one point. "Dad knew the ranch was dying. He could have told us, could have used that Alaska money to save it. But then you would have spent your lives running a ranch propped up by oil money," I said. "He wanted you to make your own choice, just like he wanted me to make mine." "Did you ever regret it?" Joel asked. "Leaving?" I thought about 35 years of running into burning buildings, of pulling people out of collapsed structures, of teaching young firefighters how to stay alive, of coming home to Linda, raising Thomas, building a life that meant something beyond acreage and cattle prices. Not once, I said. Not for a single second. Dad knew that too, Marcus said quietly. I think that's why he was so angry. Because you were right, and he couldn't stand it. 3 months later, the ranch was restructured, mortgages paid, new equipment purchased. Marcus and Joel had breathing room for the first time in years. They even hired a consulting firm to help modernize the operation. Last I heard, they're breaking even, maybe even making a small profit. Thomas used his share of my Alaska money to start a nonprofit legal aid clinic in Denver. I'm funding it. Seems fitting. Dad spent 70 years holding on to land he never saw, so that his son could spend 35 years helping people who couldn't help themselves. Now that money's helping even more people, legacy working the way it's supposed to. I moved back to Montana last year. Not to the ranch. I bought a small place in Billings, near the fire station where I started my career. I volunteer there sometimes, teach fire safety to kids, tell stories about the old days. And once a month, I drive out to the family cemetery, stand between my parents' graves, tell my father about what's happening with his money, about Marcus and Joel, about Thomas's clinic, about all the ways his secret plan worked out better than he probably imagined. You were a stubborn old bastard, I said last time I was there. But you were my stubborn old bastard. And you were right. The real game was happening on a completely different board. I just wish you'd told me you were proud before you died. But then, in a way, he did. 420 letters, 70 years of tax payments on land he never saw, a footlocker full of newspaper clippings, and a letter that said everything that mattered. My father spent 35 years showing me he was proud in the only way he knew how. By watching, by documenting, by planning, by making sure that when he was gone, I'd finally understand. The ranch will probably stay in the family now. Marcus's oldest son is showing interest in taking over someday. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Either way is okay. Because we learned something our father took 70 years to figure out. Legacy isn't about land. It's not about holding on to what your great-grandfather claimed. It's about understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let your children find their own way, and then spending the rest of your life making sure they know you're proud of them for trying. My father gave me a footlocker at his funeral. Inside was $8 million and a lifetime of love he couldn't figure out how to say out loud. My brothers got a ranch. They got the obvious inheritance. The one that looked valuable. The one everyone expected. But I got the real gift. I got validation. I got proof that every fire I fought, every life I saved, every choice I made that disappointed everyone around me, all of it mattered to the one person whose opinion I'd spent 35 years pretending not to care about. They inherited the legacy. I inherited the love. And you know what? I'd make that trade every single time.